You make the point that law is sort of a tool, but it's people and the morality of people that really determine justice in America. Is that right?
Yeah, look, we have a saying that we have in this country that's very important, not just for lawyers, but for all citizens, to make sure their rights are protected, that we're a nation of laws, not men. So it's incredibly important to have good laws, to have a good charter, which in this country is our Constitution, and to have good rules and good procedures. That's all important, and that's essential to making sure that justice is being done, although somebody maybe disagrees with me. But if you don't have good people that have character and integrity and act in good faith, to interpret those laws, to enforce those laws, to decide which people to investigate, which people not to investigate, then you have just as much injustice as you would have if you didn't have good laws in the first place. You know, and in the whole debate over the Barr summary of the Mueller report, and I'm sure we'll get to more questions later, there's this expectation that people want, quote unquote, justice, when in fact we have not even seen the 300 pages. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, so I think there is a tendency, particularly when you have investigations involving political people, whether it's somebody running as the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, or somebody who is the Republican president, Donald Trump. And sometimes I worry about this, that there is a substitution of political preference for what the law and what legal justice at least requires and allows. And so you can sometimes not separate those two things. Sometimes people say justice is a result, and I think justice is not a result. I mean, part of the reason that the book is called Doing Justice is to suggest that it's a process. And it's impossible in many ways to define what justice is. And sometimes justice, as a legal matter and as a moral or ethical matter, is not going to satisfy everyone. Because if you don't want Donald Trump in office and you dislike him, and a lot of people do, that doesn't necessarily mean that Bob Mueller is going to deliver you from, that outcome, from that result. The law is the law, and the facts are the facts, and the truth is the truth, and there are limits to the law. There are not limits to what we can do, at the ballot box. There are not limits to what we can do in terms of public opinion and the court of public opinion. But people need to understand that the way the law unfolds is not necessarily the same way as politics unfolds.
Yeah, trusting that process. You talk about that in your book, Doing Justice, a prosecutor's thoughts on crime, punishment, and the rule of law. Let's stick with Mueller. Let's stick with William Barr, because just within the last couple of hours, the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Doug Collins, a Republican, writing to the chairman, Jerry Nadler, a Democrat from New York, saying, I write encouraging you to invite Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III to testify before our committee without delay. If you seek both transparency and for the American public to learn the full contours of the special counsel's investigation, public testimony from Mueller himself is undoubtedly the best way to accomplish this goal, end quote. All right, Preet Bharara, my question to you. Do we need to hear from Bob Mueller? Do we need this full release sooner rather than later in order to restore that trust in this whole entire process?
So I'm going to answer yes to all your questions. And I had not seen that quote. It had just happened in the last little while.
Yeah.
I'm imagining that is an invitation that's too good to pass up on the part of the chairman, Jerry Nadler. With respect to the timing, my thought is, yeah, absolutely. The fullest version of the Mueller report that can be made public, the better. My view is also that Bob Mueller would be useful to come and testify. But I think the order should be the Mueller report becomes public, or at least available to Congress, and then you have Bob Mueller himself testify, because I think you're going to get a fuller sense of what the investigation was about. I think also the members of the committee will be in a position to ask better, smarter, more thoughtful questions once they have the Mueller report, as opposed to asking questions in the dark. So I think there should be an order to things, and hopefully the Mueller report becomes public soon, and Bob Mueller himself can testify soon thereafter.
It would kind of be like Marty and I interviewing you without reading your book. I mean, how are lawmakers
that happens
supposed?
Sometimes.
Not here. How are lawmakers supposed to interview someone on a report that hasn't even been released yet? But tomorrow, regardless of what anyone thinks, Attorney General William Barr is going to be testifying before members of the House. What do you think? What will you be looking for that will be emerging from his testimony, from William Barr's testimony? Give us a preview.
Yeah, so you're exactly right that it's hard to ask the best, most thoughtful, most penetrating questions if you don't have the underlying material. But look, based on the report, on the summary that Bill Barr himself put forward, I think there are a lot of questions to ask. In particular, the reasoning behind his decision, in the absence of Bob Mueller deciding the question of obstruction and whether or not it was criminal, the decision-making by Bill Barr as to make a pronouncement and essentially exonerate the president when it doesn't look like that question was intended for Bill Barr. It looks like Bob Mueller intended for that question to be answered by Congress. So, I would ask that question in 100 different ways. Why did you do that? Do you have an understanding of what Bob Mueller's intention was? Was there anything in the report that suggested in its language that Bob Mueller wanted Congress to ultimately answer the question, because that's how our system of government is set up, where you have co-equal branches of government, and you have a mechanism for holding a president accountable in the Constitution itself. What was your thinking about that? The timing as to why you put out that summary so quickly, but then the delay in the timing of releasing the full report. What are the reasons for that? What are the bases on which you plan to redact things? I think there are a million questions to ask. I agree with your premise that those questions would probably be more probing and thoughtful and result in more light once they understand what happened with the Mueller report. But I don't think it'll be without illumination.
If I can switch for another investigative issue, and that is the Democrats' request of Donald Trump's tax returns from the IRS. Splitting the political from the legal.
Yeah.
What's your view on that request? Is it valid? Is it something that the IRS should conform to?
Yeah. So I read the statute 6103. I think it's F, subsection F.
Yep.
Very impressive that I knew the statutory site. And that seems very clear. It doesn't admit of exceptions. It says, shall furnish to the committee, tax return of any person. And it doesn't say there's an exception for the president. But I think you're correct that you have this other, political dimension to all of this, both on the part of the requesting committee and on the part of the IRS and the president saying you shouldn't have it. And my worry in all of this is that there are good faith bases for saying we're going to redact this, or there are good faith bases for saying we're going to request this, or there are good faith bases for saying the IRS should not produce something. And I worry that those are pretexts sometimes, and it's hard to judge how good faith the people's views are separate and apart from the law. I mean, I think it would be important for the committee to state all the reasons why it's legitimate, whether or not it's lawful, all the reasons why it's sort of politically and ethically legitimate to ask for the tax return. I think there are many reasons, only one of which was really recited in the letter, and I think that's to the detriment of people's understanding of the process.